Emma's house was old. It creaked and groaned. The wooden floorboards, worn from years of footsteps, seemed to have a life of their own. Every step she took was accompanied by a symphony of creaks and groans, as if the house itself was whispering secrets from the past. Lately, it whispered. Every night the sound seemed to come from the attic. Thump, thump, screech. The attic, a place Emma rarely ventured, had become a source of unease. Shadows danced in the corners and dust particles floated in the eerie light, creating an atmosphere of mystery and dread. Emma shivered under her blankets. The once comforting weight of her bed now felt like a fragile barrier against the unknown. Her heart raced with every thump and screech, her mind conjuring images of what could be lurking above. One night, a new sound, a voice, softly at first. It was barely more than a whisper, but it sent chills down her spine. The voice seemed to weave through the darkness, wrapping around her like a cold, invisible hand. It seemed to say her name, Emma. The sound was unmistakable, and it filled her with a sense of dread she had never known before. It was as if the house itself was calling out to her, demanding her attention.
Emma. The voice was clearer now, more insistent. It echoed through the hallway, bouncing off the walls and filling the space with an eerie resonance.
Emma sat up in bed. She listened. The silence that followed was almost deafening, a stark contrast to the cacophony of noises that had filled the night. Her ears strained to catch any hint of the voice, but there was nothing. Silence. She lay back down. Her mind raced with questions. Was it just her imagination, or was there something more sinister at play? She tried to convince herself it was nothing, but the unease lingered.
Emma. The voice came again, more urgent this time. It was as if the house was growing impatient, demanding her attention.
The voice whispered again. It was closer now, almost as if it was right beside her. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and a cold sweat broke out on her forehead. Emma pulled the covers over her head. She squeezed her eyes shut. She hoped that if she couldn't see the darkness, it couldn't see her. But the voice persisted, growing louder and more insistent. The voice was closer now, right outside her door. It was as if the source of the sound was just beyond the threshold, waiting for her to make a move. Emma jumped out of bed. She ran to her door and threw it open. Her heart pounded in her chest as she peered into the hallway, half expecting to see a figure standing there. The hallway was empty, but the whispering continued. It seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once, filling the space with an unsettling presence. It seemed to be coming from the attic door at the end of the hall. The door, usually closed tight, was now slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling out and casting long shadows on the floor. Emma knew she had to find out what was causing the noises, but the thought of going up to the attic filled her with dread.
Mommy, I keep hearing noises. There's something in the attic.
It's just the house settling, honey. Go back to bed.
But it sounds like someone's up there, and I heard someone calling my name.
Don't be silly. There's no one up there. Now go to sleep.
Emma knew her mother wouldn't believe her. She always said the same thing. But Emma knew what she had heard. She decided to prove it. Tomorrow night, she would see for herself what was in the attic. The next night, Emma lay in bed, her mind racing with thoughts of the attic. She waited until her parents were asleep, listening to the soft, rhythmic breathing coming from their room. Then she crept out of bed, her feet barely making a sound on the wooden floor. Emma tiptoed down the hallway, the darkness enveloping her like a thick blanket. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing in her ears like a drum. She reached the attic door. It was slightly ajar, just as she had left it the night before. A sliver of light spilled out from inside, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Emma took a deep breath and pushed the door open, the hinges creaking in protest. The stairs creaked under her feet as she climbed, each step feeling like an eternity. Each step was a drumbeat in the silence of the house, the sound amplifying her fear. The air grew colder as she neared the top, a chill running down her spine. It smelled of dust and something old and forgotten, like a memory long buried. Emma's eyes darted around the attic, taking in the forgotten relics of the past. She spotted an old dusty trunk in the corner and felt an inexplicable urge to open it. As she lifted the lid, dust particles danced in the air, illuminated by the sliver of light. Inside, she found old photographs and letters, remnants of a time long past. Emma picked up a photograph, her fingers tracing the faces of people she had never met. A mix of curiosity and fear washed over her as she wondered about their stories. She put the photograph back and continued to explore, her heart still pounding. In another corner, she found an old diary, its pages yellowed with age. She opened it carefully, the pages crackling as she turned them, revealing handwritten entries. As she read, her expression changed from curiosity to shock, the words revealing secrets she never imagined. Emma realized that the attic held more than just old memories. It held the key to a mystery. She closed the diary, a newfound determination in her eyes. She knew she had to uncover the truth. As she left the attic, she looked back one last time, knowing that this was just the beginning of her journey. Emma walked down the hallway, the light fading behind her, but her resolve growing stronger with each step. Her face was a mix of fear and determination, ready to face whatever lay ahead. She entered her bedroom and closed the door quietly, her mind racing with the possibilities of what she had discovered. Lying in bed, she stared at the ceiling, her thoughts consumed by the attic's call. There was a glint of excitement in her eyes, knowing that her adventure was just beginning. Emma closed her eyes, a small smile on her lips, ready to embrace whatever the attic had in store for her. The attic was dark and dusty, cobwebs hung from every corner. Emma could barely make out the shapes of old furniture and boxes piled high. The whispering was louder now. It seemed to be coming from the far end of the attic. Emma slowly made her way through the clutter. She brushed cobwebs aside with her hand. The floorboards creaked under her weight. She could hear her own breathing echoing in the silence.
Then she saw it. A chill ran down her spine as her eyes adjusted to the darkness.
In the dim light, she could just make out a figure sitting on a rocking chair. The chair creaked softly, swaying back and forth as if moved by an unseen force.
It was a doll. Not just any doll, but one that seemed to exude an unsettling presence.
A porcelain doll with long dark hair and a lacy white dress. The dress was old-fashioned, almost antique, and the doll's hair looked as if it had been meticulously styled. Its eyes were open, staring right at Emma. They were a piercing blue, almost too lifelike, and seemed to hold a depth that was unnerving.
Emma's breath caught in her throat. She felt a wave of fear wash over her, paralyzing her in place. She had never seen this doll before. It wasn't hers. The attic was filled with old, forgotten items, but this doll stood out, as if it didn't belong there. She had never seen anything like it. The craftsmanship was exquisite, yet there was something off-putting about its gaze.
The doll's eyes seemed to follow her every move. No matter where she stood, those eyes were locked onto her, unblinking and intense.
"Hello?" Emma whispered, her voice trembling. She felt foolish talking to a doll, but the silence was too oppressive.
Her voice echoed in the stillness. The attic seemed to absorb the sound, making it feel even more isolated. The doll didn't answer. It just sat there, rocking slightly in the chair, its eyes fixed on Emma. The silence was deafening, and the air felt thick with tension. Emma took a hesitant step forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached out a trembling hand towards the doll, unsure of what she was expecting to happen. The closer she got, the more she felt an inexplicable sense of dread. The doll's eyes seemed to bore into her soul, and she couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just a lifeless toy. It was as if it was waiting for something or someone. Emma's mind raced with questions. Who had put the doll here? Why did it feel so menacing? She knew she had to find out, but the fear was almost too much to bear. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever might come next. Suddenly the doll's head turned. It smiled at Emma. A chill ran down Emma's spine.
Emma, the doll said.
Its voice was high and sweet, but there was something underneath, something cold and menacing.
Emma's eyes widened in fear. The doll was alive! It knew her name! She wanted to run, to scream, but she couldn't move. She was frozen in place.
Don't you want to play, Emma? The doll asked.
It held out a small, pale hand. Its fingers were long and thin, like spider legs.
No, leave me alone.
She turned to run, but the doll was suddenly standing in front of her. It moved so fast, Emma hadn't even seen it stand up. The doll's eyes glowed with an eerie light. Its smile widened into a grotesque grin.
You can't leave, Emma. You're mine now.
Emma screamed and tried to push past the doll, but it was too strong. It grabbed Emma's arm with its icy fingers. Emma struggled to break free, but the doll's grip was like iron. The doll dragged Emma toward the rocking chair. Emma kicked and screamed, but no one could hear her. She was trapped. The attic seemed to press in on her. The shadows danced and swirled. The whispering filled her ears.
Emma, Emma, Emma.
It was the doll's voice, chanting her name over and over. Emma closed her eyes, trying to shut out the horror, but the doll's laughter echoed in her ears. It was a cold, empty sound that promised nothing but darkness. When Emma opened her eyes, she was sitting on the rocking chair. The doll stood in front of her, its face inches from hers.
Now the fun begins.
Its eyes glittered with wicked delight. Emma tried to speak, but no sound came out. She was paralyzed with fear. The doll raised its hand. It held a long silver needle. It glinted in the dim light. The doll smiled.
Don't worry, Emma. This won't hurt a bit.
The needle plunged towards Emma's heart. Emma screamed, but it was too late. The attic was silent. The doll sat on the rocking chair. It held a new doll in its lap. A porcelain doll with long dark hair and a lacy white dress. Its eyes were closed, but a faint smile played on its lips. The doll's eyes fluttered open. They were the same shade of blue as Emma's.
Hello.
His voice was high and sweet, just like Emma's. The rocking chair swayed gently back and forth, forever.